Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sun Moon Audiobook, the channel where we share wisdom and inspiring book journeys to help you grow and develop your best self, inside and out. There is a quiet moment before dawn, when the world holds its breath, when the sky is still painted in the ashes of night, and the first strands of light stretch slowly across the horizon. In that fragile hour, the earth feels raw, like a soul just beginning to wake. It is in this stillness that truth seems to whisper louder, reminding us of what we've forgotten, of what we keep trying to outrun. And it is in this spirit that the wisdom of the Stoics comes to us, not as cold philosophy etched into stone, but as a warm hand on the shoulder, a steady voice reminding us how to live, how to endure, how to love, and how to let go. Ryan Holiday, the writer behind this work, is not an old philosopher wrapped in a toga by the firelight of a vanished empire. He is a voice of today, someone who has walked the noisy streets of modern life, who has faced the chaos of ambition, success, and failure, and who has turned to these ancient words not to escape, but to survive. His gift lies in weaving the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca into the rhythms of our lives, where phones buzz and anxieties churn, where the storms outside are mirrored by storms inside. He does not preach from a distance. He translates, he guides, he shares like a friend who has tasted the medicine and knows its bitterness, but also its healing power. At its heart, this book is not about philosophy in the abstract. It is about survival, about finding your footing on the shifting ground of existence. And one of its first lessons is control what belongs to you and what does not. The Stoics remind us that most of our suffering comes from the tangled roots of confusion, from reaching out with desperate hands to grasp things that were never meant to be ours. Imagine standing in the rain and trying to command the storm to stop, shouting at the clouds as they rumble and break. You exhaust yourself. You rage. You despair. And yet the rain falls all the same. The Stoics say, put down the shouting. Let go of the clouds. What you can control are your actions, your choices, your thoughts. The story you tell yourself when the rain soaks through your clothes. This is not resignation, it is liberation. To know what is yours to shape and what is beyond your reach is to free yourself from unnecessary chains. The mantra echoes softly here. Focus on what you can control. Release what you cannot. But control is not the end. It is the beginning. From there flows another lesson. Time. Time is the currency of life, and yet we spend it as if it were infinite, as if tomorrow were guaranteed. Seneca's voice comes through the centuries to remind us that we are not short of time. We are wasteful of it. Think of the hours scrolling endlessly, the conversations laced with bitterness, the grudges held like treasures, the plans postponed because someday feels safer than today. The Stoics ask us to see that every breath is a coin slipping from our hand. The question is not whether the purse will empty, it will. The question is, how will you spend it? And in this truth, there is urgency, but also tenderness. You, listening now, carry within you the possibility to live differently, to make the minutes sacred, to stop letting life leak through your fingers like water you never tried to hold. And then there is the storm within, the emotions that rise and crash like restless tides. Anger, fear, jealousy, despair. How often they seize us, dragging us into places we did not choose. The Stoics were not cold statues immune to such things. They felt deeply, they suffered, they burned with the same human fire, but they believed in taming that fire. Not by extinguishing it, but by shaping it, like a blacksmith hammering iron into form. To be angry is human, but to be ruled by anger is to surrender your freedom. To fear is natural, but to live inside fear is to build a cage for your soul. The discipline is to notice, to breathe, to remember that emotions are visitors, not rulers. The mantra returns. Focus on what you can control. Even here, in the heat of passion, the only true control is your response. You may not stop the wave from rising, but you can learn how to ride it. Sometimes the Stoics turn us toward death, and though it sounds heavy, it is not meant to crush it, is meant to awaken. To remember death is not to drown in sorrow, but to sharpen your vision of life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. These words are not morbid. They are merciful. They cut through the noise and strip away the illusions of permanence. Every embrace, every sunrise, every ordinary moment is lit differently when you hold death in your awareness. Suddenly, the trivial complaints shrink, the grudges feel foolish, and the urgency of love becomes clearer. You realize that life is not in the future. It is here, pulsing in the veins of this moment. And with that awareness, gratitude deepens, courage strengthens, and fear loosens its grip. There is also humility woven into the fabric of Stoicism. The recognition that we are not the center of the universe, that much of what we carry, pride, ego, the hunger for validation, are illusions that fracture our peace. Humility does not mean shrinking, it means seeing clearly. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius, ruler of one of the mightiest empires, reminded himself daily that he was but a man, made of flesh, bound to the same dust as those who served him. This humility is not weakness, but strength, the kind that roots you in reality, that allows you to act with compassion rather than arrogance. Think of the leaders, artists, thinkers who lost themselves to ego, and then think of those who remained steady, grounded, serving something larger than themselves. It is humility that allows true greatness to breathe. The Stoics speak of resilience, of the strength that grows when life tests us. Adversity is not an interruption to life, it is life. The brokenness, the disappointments, the betrayals, the nights when you feel stripped of all you thought you were, these are not punishments, but opportunities. The Stoics tell us that the obstacle is the way, that what blocks the path becomes the path. History is filled with figures who lived this truth. Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for decades, emerged not with bitterness, but with a vision for reconciliation. He turned the weight of chains into the strength of forgiveness. His story is not separate from Stoicism. It is its living expression. Resilience is born not in avoiding pain, but in transforming it, in letting the wound become a window rather than a wall. Perhaps the most tender lesson of all, virtue. For the Stoics, the good life was not defined by wealth or fame or even comfort, but by character, by the steady practice of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These are not lofty ideals meant only for saints. They are daily choices. To speak truth when lies would be easier. To act with kindness when cruelty tempts. To be moderate when excess seduces. To choose courage when fear whispers. Virtue is the anchor in the storm, the compass when all else feels uncertain. And though the world may not always reward it, your soul does. For in living with virtue, you live with peace. And here, let me share one quiet memory. I remember sitting in a hospital waiting room once, the kind of place where the air feels heavy with unspoken prayers. A woman across from me was holding her child's shoe, just one small shoe, turning it in her hands as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. She wasn't speaking, just holding, breathing, waiting. And in that moment, the teachings of the Stoics landed differently in my chest. Life is so fragile, so uncertain, so beyond our control. But what remains is how we show up with patience, with presence, with courage. That image of her, silent but steadfast, has never left me. The wisdom of this book is not meant to be read once and put away. It is meant to be lived, breathed, practiced, again and again. You will forget, and then you will remember, and in the remembering, you will grow stronger. You, who are listening now, carry within you the same strength that carried emperors and exiles, mothers and soldiers, philosophers and dreamers. This strength is not given, it is practiced. And the practice begins not tomorrow, but now, in the choices you make when you stand up from this moment. The practice of Stoicism unfolds like a daily ritual. not a distant philosophy reserved for scholars in dusty rooms. It is a living rhythm, a way of approaching the morning, of facing the interruptions, of softening into the night. Each page of the Daily Stoic is a reminder that wisdom is not abstract, it is lived. It teaches that your mind is a garden, and every thought is a seed. Some seeds sprout into weeds that strangle your peace, while others blossom into flowers of clarity and calm. What you water grows, what you neglect withers. And so the question becomes simple yet profound. Which seeds are you feeding each day? The Stoics tell us to plant with intention, to guard our inner soil from the invasions of resentment, envy, or despair, and to cultivate instead gratitude, patience, and purpose. This is not glamorous work. It is quiet, repetitive, unseen. But over time, the garden blooms, and your soul breathes easier. There is also the matter of perspective. Marcus Aurelius would often remind himself that life is a play, and he is but an actor assigned a role. Some roles are brief, others long. Some are noble, others humble. But the dignity lies not in the role itself, but in how it is played. Think about this. A janitor sweeping the halls with care can embody more wisdom and grace than a king ruled by vanity. When you remember that life is a stage, you begin to loosen your grip on the obsession with status, with recognition, with outcomes you cannot force. You realize the point is not to demand a different script, but to act your part with integrity. And suddenly, the weight of comparison, the endless ladder of better and more, begins to crumble. You see the truth. Your task is not to control the world, but to control yourself within it. Another thread that runs deep through the Stoic teaching is the power of silence. In a world addicted to noise, to quick opinions, to the constant performance of self, silence feels almost radical, but the Stoics prized it. Epictetus once said that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason: to listen more than we speak. To hold your tongue in moments of anger is not weakness. It is mastery. To resist the urge to argue when your ego itches is not passivity. It is strength. Silence creates space, and in that space, wisdom grows. Imagine a lake, disturbed by every stone thrown into it, rippling endlessly. Then imagine that same lake, still, reflecting the sky with perfect clarity. Your mind can be that lake. Stillness is not emptiness, it is presence. Consider also the Stoic approach to wealth and material possessions. They did not condemn comfort or success, but they warned against dependence on them. To tie your happiness to what can be taken from you is to build your home on sand. Fortune turns quickly, wealth rises and falls, possessions age and break. The Stoics teach us to enjoy them while they are here, but to remember that they do not define us. True wealth is found in the ability to be content with little, to find joy not in what you own, but in who you are. Think of the philosophers who owned almost nothing yet lived richly in spirit, and compare them to the billionaires who own everything yet cannot sleep at night. The difference lies not in what is outside, but in what is within. And when you grasp this, freedom takes root in your heart. Yet freedom is incomplete without responsibility. The Stoics believed in duty to family, to community, to the larger whole. Your life is not just your own. It is part of a vast fabric. Every choice ripples outward, touching others in ways you cannot always see. To live as if you are an island is to miss the truth of our interdependence. Marcus Aurelius spoke often of the common good, of serving humanity, of seeing himself as a citizen of the world. This perspective reframes our small grievances and private ambitions. It reminds us that our highest calling is not only to perfect ourselves, but to contribute, to uplift, to leave the world a little lighter for our having walked through it. The daily practice of Stoicism is not easy. It asks you to stand guard at the door of your mind, to question your impulses, to surrender what is beyond your reach, to sharpen your character again and again. And you will stumble. You will forget. You will fall into anger or fear or despair. But each time you return. That is the path. Not perfection, but practice. Not arrival, but return. Each moment is a chance to begin again. And in this returning, a strength forms, quiet and unshakable. Pause here for a moment and let yourself feel the weight of this truth. Life will hurt you. It already has, and it will again. There will be losses you cannot explain, nights you cannot escape, burdens you did not choose. But you are not powerless. Within you is a choice, small yet profound. How will you respond? The Stoics do not promise a life without pain, but they promise the possibility of dignity within it. They remind you that suffering can carve depth into the soul, that adversity can reveal courage you did not know you had, that brokenness can be a teacher more honest than any comfort. And so, when you wake tomorrow and the day presses against you with its demands and distractions, remember these simple truths. Focus on what you can control. Release what you cannot. Treat time as sacred, for it slips away with every breath. Guard your mind like a garden, planting only what you wish to harvest. Choose silence when noise tempts. Remember that your wealth lies not in possessions, but in contentment. Live not for yourself alone, but for the common good. And when the storm comes, and it will stand firm, knowing that the obstacle is not the end of the path, but the path itself. The essence of Stoicism is not found in lofty words, but in the small, steady ways it reshapes how we live each day. It is in the pause before reacting when someone insults you. It is in the choice to rise early and begin the day with gratitude rather than complaint. It is in the quiet strength to endure disappointment without letting it poison your heart. When Ryan Holiday translates these ancient truths for modern life, he invites us to see philosophy not as a subject for study, but as a discipline for survival. Think of it as training for the soul, like weights for the spirit, slowly building resilience, clarity, and calm. You practice not once but daily, as you would breathe or eat, because life never stops asking for your strength. One of the most hauntingly beautiful threads in the Stoic tradition is the idea of acceptance, what the Greeks called amor fati, the love of fate. This is more than resignation, more than saying, it is what it is. It is the radical embrace of life as it unfolds, without demanding it be otherwise. Imagine holding your life like a river in your hands, not trying to force it backward or forward, but letting it flow, loving it not in spite of its twists and rapids, but because of them. This acceptance transforms suffering into meaning, loss into depth, failure into teacher. To love your fate is to stop arguing with reality, to stop exhausting yourself against what already is, and to find within it the seed of growth. You cannot always choose your circumstances, but you can choose to meet them with love instead of resistance. Consider the story of Thomas Edison. One night, when he was 67 years old, his laboratory caught fire, burning away decades of work. His son ran to him, panicked, only to find Edison calm, even lighthearted. He told his son to fetch his mother, saying, "She will never see a fire like this again." The flames devoured his inventions, his notes, his tools, but Edison accepted it, even welcomed it, saying that misfortune had cleared away the old and made room for the new. Within days, he began again, building anew from the ashes. This is amor fati lived out, not to merely endure fate, but to love it, to see in it the hidden gift of renewal. Yet loving fate does not mean passivity. The Stoics were active, disciplined, engaged. Acceptance is not laziness, it is clarity. You see the world as it is, and from that clarity, you act. When Epictetus, born a slave, taught that freedom comes from mastering one's mind, he did not mean to sit idle in chains. He meant that within every chain lies a choice. The choice to respond with dignity, to hold on to self-respect, to refuse to let another man's cruelty decide the quality of your soul. This strength radiates across centuries. Freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the presence of self-mastery. Another lesson that shines through the Daily Stoic is gratitude. Gratitude not as a shallow list of blessings recited at night, but as a way of seeing, a lens that colors everything. Gratitude is remembering that you woke up today, that you breathed, that your heart still beats. It is noticing the light spilling through a window, the laughter of a stranger, the food on your table. The Stoics remind us that much of what we take for granted is the very fabric of our existence, and that to live well is not to demand more, but to recognize enough. Gratitude disarms envy, soothes fear, dissolves anger. It is impossible to be truly grateful and bitter at the same time. Gratitude roots you in the present moment, reminding you that even here, even now, there is something worthy of awe. But still, the human heart resists. It wants control, certainty, guarantees. And so we wrestle, we fight with life, we try to hold too tightly. This is where the Stoics meet us in our weakness, reminding us gently that peace comes not from grasping, but from loosening. When you cling too tightly to what cannot last, you suffer twice, once in the loss, and once in the fear of losing. But when you hold things lightly, relationships, possessions, ambitions, you can enjoy them fully while they are here, and release them when they are gone. This does not mean loving less. It means loving more freely, without the desperation of ownership. And yes, there will be days when these teachings feel distant, when the storm inside seems louder than any philosophy can quiet. On those days, the Stoics invite us to return to the simplest practices. Breathe, step back, remember what is yours to control. Begin again, even if all you can manage is one small act of courage, one whispered word of gratitude, one moment of silence in the noise. Progress is not measured in perfection, but in persistence. You, listening now, may feel weary, may feel that life has pressed you too hard, asked too much. But you are stronger than you know. You carry within you the same strength that carried Marcus Aurelius through wars, Epictetus through slavery, Seneca through exile. These men were not gods. They were human, fragile, flawed. And yet they practiced, they returned, they endured. So can you. The teachings are not far away. They are here, in your breath, in your choices, in the quiet courage of continuing. There is a truth that the Stoics return to again and again. The obstacle is the way. It is not a comforting slogan, but a piercing insight into the nature of life. Every barrier you encounter is not merely something to be endured. It is the material from which you grow. Think of a tree in a storm, branches bent and twisted by the wind. That very struggle is what makes the roots grip deeper, what makes the trunk more unyielding. Without resistance, there is no strength. Without trials, there is no resilience. The Stoics did not dream of a life without obstacles. They trained themselves to see in every obstacle the raw material for virtue. When you face betrayal, you practice forgiveness. When you face fear, you practice courage. When you face loss, you practice acceptance. Each difficulty becomes a forge, each setback a sculptor shaping the contours of your soul. The obstacle does not end the path, it becomes the path. We see this echoed in lives far beyond philosophy. Consider Abraham Lincoln, who faced crushing defeats long before he became president. He lost elections, lost businesses, lost loved ones. And yet, each loss honed him, deepened him, prepared him for the burden of leading a nation divided. His greatness did not come in spite of his obstacles, but because of them. When he finally stood to deliver words that would heal and unite, his voice carried the weight of every wound, every scar, transformed into wisdom. The Stoics would say, this is the way of obstacles turned into opportunity, pain transformed into strength. Another core thread in Stoicism is the art of presence. The human mind drifts endlessly replaying the past, fearing the future, missing the only place where life exists, why here, now. The Stoics practiced presence not through escape, but through awareness. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself, do not live as if you had 1,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good. These words are not a warning, but a call to awaken. Too often, we live like sleepwalkers, moving through our days half distracted, always postponing, always waiting. Presence is the radical act of living fully in this moment, tasting it, breathing it, noticing it before it slips away. Presence transforms ordinary moments into sacred ones, turning even simple acts, washing your hands, walking outside, speaking with a friend, into encounters with life itself. But presence requires courage. Courage to face what is here, not what we wish were here. The Stoics placed courage at the heart of virtue, not only the courage to fight wars or face danger, but the courage to face your own fears, your own weakness, your own truth. Courage is standing in the mirror and admitting where you have fallen short. Courage is forgiving yourself and trying again. Courage is refusing to let fear dictate the terms of your life. When Epictetus taught that it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them, he was pointing to courage. The courage to see clearly, to reframe, to choose a different story. You may not be able to silence fear, but you can decide not to be ruled by it. And yet, in all this talk of strength and discipline, the Stoics were not cold. They valued compassion deeply, for others and for oneself. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about kindness, about treating others with patience because they too are struggling. They too are fragile. They too are learning. To live as a Stoic is not to harden your heart, but to open it wisely, to recognize that we are all threads in the same tapestry. Kindness is not weakness, but alignment with truth, that what harms one part harms the whole. Even in your practice of self-discipline, the Stoics invite you to extend compassion inward, to forgive yourself for stumbling, to begin again without bitterness. It is in this balanced discipline and compassion, strength and tenderness, that Stoicism becomes not a rigid shield, but a flexible guide. Life will bend you, sometimes nearly break you, but with Stoic wisdom, you bend with purpose, not despair. You learn to rise, to stand, to walk again, carrying with you not bitterness, but depth. There is a moment in every journey of growth where the teachings stop feeling like ideas and start becoming reminders of who you have always been. The Daily Stoic invites us to that place, where ancient voices echo softly into our modern struggles and remind us that beneath the noise, beneath the fear, there is a steady center waiting to be lived from. It is here that we are asked to reconsider the meaning of freedom. Freedom, the Stoics teach, is not the absence of external chains, but the mastery of the self. A person can be imprisoned and still free if their mind is unshaken, if they do not surrender their will to despair. Another can live in luxury and yet be enslaved to ego, to fear, to cravings that never end. True freedom is inner sovereignty, the power to choose your response regardless of circumstance. It is the ability to live in alignment with virtue even when the world seems misaligned. When you realize this, the world loses much of its power to control you, and you begin to taste what it means to be unshaken. And from freedom flows another lesson: simplicity. The Stoics remind us that a life weighed down with excess too many possessions, too many desires, too many distractions becomes heavy, burdensome. They point us toward a simpler way, where contentment is found not in accumulating more, but in needing less. To walk lightly, to let go of the constant hunger for next, is to discover the joy of enough. Imagine your soul as a traveler. How much easier is the journey when the bags are light? Seneca wrote that poverty is not having too little, but wanting more. When you no longer measure your worth by what you own or what others think, but by the peace in your heart, you step into a kind of richness that cannot be stolen. Simplicity is not deprivation, it is liberation. Alongside simplicity, the Stoics teach us patience. Life moves in rhythms beyond our control, and we are often restless, demanding outcomes, frustrated when the world does not move on our schedule. Patience is not passivity, it is trust in the unfolding, the willingness to endure seasons of waiting, the humility to know that timing is not always yours to command. When a seed is planted, no amount of impatience can make it sprout faster. It needs time, water, sun, and care. So too with our lives. We often resist this, demanding that our growth, our healing, our success come now. But patience allows us to walk with the seasons rather than fight them, to endure the winter knowing that spring will come. Patience softens the hard edges of frustration and teaches us to find peace even in waiting. There is also the practice of daily reflection. The Stoics did not leave their growth to chance. They journaled, they examined themselves, they returned each night to ask, "What did I do well? Where did I stumble? What can I do better tomorrow?" This practice is not self-punishment, but self-awareness. The gentle discipline of looking honestly at yourself and choosing growth. Imagine ending each day with this quiet ritual, closing the chapter not with regret but with learning. Reflection sharpens the soul like a blade honed over time. It prevents us from drifting blindly, reminding us that life is too precious to live unexamined. And in this reflection, compassion is key. To see your flaws clearly without cruelty, to forgive yourself while still striving to grow, this is the way of steady transformation. Midway through, the teachings of the Daily Stoic offer us a kind of pause, a breath in the midst of life's chaos. They acknowledge the conflict inside us, the fear, the restlessness, the ache for more, and they offer not judgment, but hope. You are not broken for struggling. You are human. The Stoics themselves struggled. They fell, they doubted, they feared. But they returned. And so can you. This is the heart of the practice, returning again and again to the path, no matter how many times you wander. The discipline is not in never falling, but in always rising. The hope is not in escaping struggle, but in learning to carry it with grace. And here, in this pause, there is comfort. Change is possible. Growth is possible. Peace is possible. The later lessons of the Daily Stoic invite us to live with intention, to stop drifting as if life were something happening to us, and start shaping it as something we are consciously participating in. Intention is not about rigid control or obsessive planning. It is about moving through each day with awareness, with clarity about what truly matters, with the courage to choose what aligns with your deepest values. Too often, we let days slip by in distraction, consumed by what others demand of us, or seduced by what does not nourish us. The Stoics remind us, you have only this life, only this breath, and to waste it is to betray yourself. Living with intention means asking, does this choice bring me closer to the person I wish to become, or does it pull me further away? It is about aligning your daily actions with the compass of virtue, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. With each small act, the path of your life bends toward meaning. There is also the profound teaching of perspective, the way the Stoics stretch our gaze beyond our small concerns. Marcus Aurelius would look at the stars to remind himself of the vastness of the universe, to see how tiny his worries were in the grand scale of existence. He would imagine time stretching infinitely before and after him, and recognize that his life was but a brief flicker. And rather than despair, he found peace in that recognition. When you remember your smallness, the weight of vanity falls away. The insults, the petty comparisons, the obsessive fears, they shrink into insignificance. You begin to live lighter, freer, knowing that what matters is not how long you live or how others perceive you, but how deeply you live, how truly you serve, how faithfully you embody virtue while you are here. Perspective is a medicine for the soul, shrinking the false magnitudes that torment us and magnifying the quiet beauty of what remains. Another lesson the Stoics gift us is resilience through discipline. They knew that virtue is not sustained by fleeting inspiration, but by steady practice. Discipline is the bridge between intention and reality, between who you want to be and who you become. It is the choice to rise early when you'd rather stay in bed, to speak with patience when anger burns in your chest, to pause and reflect when impulse urges you to act. Discipline is not glamorous. It is built in small, unseen moments, repeated until they become habit. Over time, discipline weaves resilience into your character, so that when storms come, and they will, you do not collapse, but stand firm, rooted in habit stronger than circumstance. It is in discipline that freedom is born, For only when you master yourself can you live fully. The Daily Stoic also whispers the necessity of forgiveness, not just for others, but for yourself. The Stoics recognize that bitterness poisons the soul, binding us to the past, chaining us to wounds that cannot be undone. To forgive is not to excuse or forget, but to release the hold that pain has over your heart. When you forgive, you reclaim your power. And when you forgive yourself, you allow yourself to begin again without carrying the weight of shame. Reflection without forgiveness becomes cruelty. Discipline without compassion becomes tyranny. Forgiveness balances justice with mercy, reminding us that the path to virtue is not straight, but winding, and that stumbling is part of learning to walk. As this wisdom sinks deeper, the Stoics invite you to act not someday, not when you feel ready, but now. Philosophy means nothing if it does not change how you live. Ryan Holiday reminds us, through these meditations, that reading without practice is like planting seeds and never watering them. Action is where Stoicism breathes, where the lessons leave the page and take root in your life. Begin with small steps. Pause before reacting. Take a moment each morning to remind yourself of what matters. End each day with reflection. Small steps build momentum. Momentum shapes character, and character shapes destiny. You do not need to transform overnight. You only need to begin and to begin again each time you forget. As the current of this wisdom draws toward its close, the Daily Stoic leaves us with a quiet but unshakable invitation to live as if your soul were being sculpted each day, not through grand gestures or perfect choices, but through the simple, steady practice of turning back to what matters. To rise when you fall. To forgive when you could condemn. To release what you cannot hold. To meet the present moment with open hands and an open heart. These practices do not promise a life without pain, but they promise a life filled with meaning. Think of it like walking through a forest at dusk. The path is uneven, shadows stretch long, and sometimes you stumble on unseen roots. But if you keep walking, step by step, your eyes adjust, the darkness feels less heavy, and then suddenly the trees part and you glimpse the glow of the horizon. Stoicism is that walk. It does not remove the forest, but it teaches you how to keep moving, how to trust the path, how to find the light that was always ahead. The lessons echo with the same mantras, soft and insistent. Focus on what you can control. Release what you cannot. Treat time as sacred, for it slips away with every breath. Remember that the obstacle is not the end of the path, but the path itself. Return again and again to the present moment, for it is the only place where life waits. These mantras are not slogans to memorize. They are lifelines to hold when the storm rages. And you, listening now, are invited to take them into your own life. When tomorrow rises, you will face frustrations, temptations, and fears. The emails will arrive, the world will clamor, and your old habits may pull at you. But in the midst of it all, you will have a choice: to pause, to breathe, to remember, to choose wisdom over impulse, courage over fear, kindness over cruelty, gratitude over complaint. It will not be perfect, but it will be enough. Each choice is a step, each step a shaping of the soul. The Daily Stoic does not end with answers, but with practice. It hands you the tools and asks you to build, to carve, to return again each day to the work of being human. And in that daily practice, you will find not only strength, but peace, not only clarity, but freedom. The philosophers of old, the emperors and exiles, lived and died long ago, but their voices linger, carried into your ear now, into your heart, waiting to be lived. So as this reflection closes, imagine this: a seed pressed into the earth. Small, fragile, almost invisible, but within it, a forest waits. Growth takes time, storms will come, seasons will turn, yet the seed carries within it everything it needs to rise. So too do you. Plant these lessons deep within you, Water them with practice, shield them with patience, and watch as your life grows into something steady, strong, and beautiful. And if this message has stirred something in you, if a seed has been planted, I invite you gently to nurture it by sharing this with others. Like, comment, subscribe, and let your voice join this conversation. Share what these words awaken in you, what struggles they touch, what hopes they lift. Because your reflection may be the spark for someone else's light. In giving your voice, you keep the wisdom alive, and together we build a world a little steadier, a little kinder, a little more free.